30 years of age. So I found it very surprising. And I said, is it because you don't ruminate over the past like we do, and so it doesn't get revived? He said, no, it's not that. Just said that. So, the other thing I remember is that he said, I don't know what hunger is. I said, what do you mean? If you don't eat food, don't you feel hungry? He said, no, I just become weaker and I eat in order to keep the body going. So I was wondering if desirelessness could go to that extent.
What do you think?
Well, I think that he told the truth. But I think that this business of getting realized is like a rebirth within this life itself. So the past dies out. I mean, it happened to dies out in the sense it is still there in somewhere, but it doesn't dominate in the consciousness. So Buddha was brought up as a Hindu, and all those Hindu morals and casteism and everything, but he walked out of it completely. And Jesus Christ was brought up as a Jew, and the Jews believed that an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. And so how did he come upon the realization that no, you must show your other cheek also? So these are all cases of people who have broken free from their past. And that's what I think Krishnamurti keeps saying when he talks about freedom from conditioning, that you have to come out of this prison of the past, which is just an accident of birth. And if we are too attached to that personality, then it blocks us from anything new. And all creative perception is beyond the known. So it requires a certain amount of freedom from the known, which is our experience. So I think something happened to him in 1922 under that pepper tree. He went through something called the process, which is a great mystery. I have talked to many people who were very close to him for a long time, including Rosalind and so on, who were there during the process. And none of them really understood what was happening to him. So it's still a mystery. We don't know about his consciousness. And the last tape that he recorded out of his own volition on 7th of February, just 10 days before his death, he said that there is a vast intelligence which has used this body, and a tremendous energy has gone through this body, and you may not find another body or that energy operating in such a body for several hundred years. I mean, you can read that. Mary Lattians has published it in the third volume of the biography called The Open Door, Krishnamurti, The Open Door. And that means that very close to what Leadbeater and Mrs. Besant had predicted. They called it the Maitreya consciousness. That's just a name coming from Buddhism. But it's some kind of intelligence or divine energy that manifested through the person of Krishnamurti. And he said all creative perception is like that. So he was not coming out of thinking, he was coming out of insight. Insight is that you actually see beyond the known, whereas thought is confined to the area of the known. All creative perception, whether in science or in art or in music, is of that nature. but to be completely free from your past, not just in one particular field of endeavor, is what one means by liberation. And I think he was a liberated man, and that he was in a sense reborn. When we are born in the next life, we don't have the memory of what is going on now. But if that happens within the same life, then possibly you lose your memory.
I do know that in many of the religious traditions, when somebody takes on that tradition or has an initiation in that tradition, very often there's a change of name to represent a change of, a supposed change of consciousness.
Yeah.
In this case, the name stayed the same, but the consciousness became something very different.
I think so too.
At a certain point in your relationship with Krishnamurti, he asked you to come and see him for a very particular discussion about the school in Rajghat.
Yeah.
And he asked you actually to take on that responsibility in a very, what many would interpret as an extremely unusual job interview. Could you say a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. And I am still surprised how his mind worked at that time. I had not met him for 5 years. I had met him in Brockwood in 1980-81. And after that, he had stopped coming to Benares because he was getting old and he wanted to cut down on his travels. And since I was at the university, I had no opportunity to meet him. But when he came here for the last time in 1985, he asked for me. I don't know how. Because he met thousands of people all over the world. But he said, call that boy who used to come to my talks and so on. I got a phone call saying, Krishnaji is here. He wants you and your wife to come and have lunch with him, and he does not want you to refuse. I said, there is no question of refusing. I arranged for my classes and we went for lunch. Lunch with him used to last for an hour or so. There were a lot of other trustees and people and discussions going on. He was a slow eater, ate very little. But after the lunch, he asked us he said, sir, I have something important to speak with you. Will you come to my room? So I said yes. And we went to his room, sat with him on the floor. He could sit cross-legged at the age of 90 on the floor. I find it difficult even now. If I do, I find it difficult to get up. But he used to do yoga every day for 2 hours or so, yoga and pranayama and so on. Though he never said that to anybody else, that you have to do yoga and so on. He did that because he felt that was good for his body and for his health. And he said, sir, may I come to the point directly? I said, well, why not? And he said, I'm not going to be around very long. I happen to know when I'm going to go. I'm not going to tell anybody. Before I go, I want to put my house in order, and I want you to take charge of Rajghat. I was stunned. I didn't even know what all there was in Rajghat. And so I said, sir, you hardly know me. So he said, no, sir, don't say that. I know you enough. But he had not seen my biodata. He didn't ask whether I was a vegetarian or I took alcohol or had any addictions. So So everything that I do before appointing somebody, he didn't do. So it's a great mystery to me. Because I think somewhere that kind of consciousness is able to see through you. And he said that. He said, you don't have to tell me, I know. He had all those occult powers which Led Peter and Mrs. Besant had. But he gave no importance to it. He said to me in that first meeting in Delhi, I asked him, so I have heard that in the esoteric section, you people sat around a table and got messages from dead souls and so on. What was that? Was it all hallucination? And he said, no sir, those things exist. It's another form of power. It has nothing to do with goodness, so I'm not interested in it. So that was his take on occult power. That a religious mind is not interested in cultivating any power, because there is no desire to manipulate or dominate on others or find things which you don't know and things like that. So, but he had all those powers, and when he needed, he could use it. People asked him, how is it that you get deceived by people and so on when you have all these powers? And he said, one doesn't use that to read a human being's mind. For the same reason, you would not read his private letters. So that was the feeling of morality, that one has that ability, but one should not use it to look through a person. But I guess when he needed to appoint someone or ask someone, he must have used that. I'm just guessing, I don't know. But it's a fact that he never inquired the details of my past, and he straight away offered me this position. He called it the rector. So I asked him, what is a rector? I know what a director is, because in India the term rector is not frequently used. So he said, don't you know? Bring the dictionary. He said, read it. So I read, and it said, one who directs and protects. So he said, now you know what the difference is. The smallest living being here must feel your protection. That is the responsibility I want you to take, like that. So this thing was to a religious place. He said, is not religious because unless the mind there is religious now, not because the Buddha lived here or Christ lived here or whatever. But the mind there today must be religious. And of course by religious he meant in quest of truth. It must attract the true pilgrim. And it must be a sanctuary for all life. So that with that responsibility, he asked me to take charge of Rajghat, and he said, I'm offering you a jewel on a silver platter, and I'm asking, will you take it? And I felt very defeated, so I tried. But I put all that in my book. I've written a book about it called The Jewel on a Silver Platter. And
the book is
I
about
think it's
that and
available
more.
in our bookshop in the TSA. Yeah.
The book is about that and much more.
Yeah.
Jewel on a Silver Platter. During this time also, you participated with Krishnamurti, David Bohm, and others in some very significant dialogues that took place.
Yeah.
One of the things that fascinated me about your particular participation was, first of all, they would be very far-ranging dialogues, but very deeply insightful. But in reading them, the transcript, or in seeing them, very often you would be seeming to, minimally you could say, challenge the thoughts that Krishnamurti would put forward. Sometimes even it seemed as if you would disagree.
and it would develop the insights more. Can you say a little bit about how that transpired?
Yes. You see, I was brought up in a home where there was no fear. My mother was a Montessorian, my father was a Theosophist, and they didn't believe in using force or punishment or threats. So we used to question elders. Even in school, I was applying them with a lot of questions. So I had no fear of Krishnamurti. I had great respect, but I differentiated between respect and inquiry or questioning. So there were a lot of things I did not agree with him, and I would feel free to say to him. I remember, for instance, in one of his talks he said, a disciplined mind is a lazy mind. And I didn't think so. So I went to him afterwards and I said, there's something I didn't understand in what you said today. He said, what? I said, you said that a disciplined mind is a lazy mind. I don't think so. A disciplined man is a person who is energetic, who does all his work and is punctual and so on. So why do you say that he is lazy? And he said, sir, if he is not lazy, why does he have to discipline himself? So he taught me this dichotomy of what you are trying to be, the opposite of that is what you are, the truth. So he said, if I have to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, I get up. But if it needs a lot of discipline to get up at 6 in the morning, then I am lazy, isn't it? So, in the same way, when you are trying to cultivate courage, it means you are fearful. Otherwise, why do you need courage? And if you are trying to be non-violent, it means you are really violent. Because if you are not violent, there is no need to cultivate non-violence. Like that. So, I learned about this corridor of the opposites in which the mind gets caught.
There was one particular
Dialogue that comes to my mind where Krishnamurti was talking about the
term that was used, he was talking about the field in which human beings operate, and basically describing it very much as if it's the field of illusion, and that no matter what it is you are doing within that field, whether you
Nothing good will ever come out.
Nothing good would, but that was a point where you challenged that very strongly and continued. What was do you have any remembrance of that?
Oh yes. Oh yes. You see, I said, sir, it seems to you like that, but we have a lot of good things in our life. We have kindness, we help each other, we have a lot of love and so on. So I don't understand why you think that you have to be completely free from the ego before you can have goodness. And he said, it's chicken feed. I mean, you are satisfied with small things. And you are saying, Indira Gandhi did some good, and Nehru did some good, and Gandhi did some good, and so on. But ultimately the world is the way it is. So all that is like aspirin. It removes your headache, but it doesn't cure the disease. So that's how I understood him to mean that when you are deeply interested in the transformation of consciousness, you are not satisfied with small things. And I remember one of his sentences quite early, 1950s, where in one of his books it is written, or he said, why worship at a candle when you can have the sun? So to him it seemed that we are satisfied with small achievements and we look for this thing. And he was asking for a much bigger demand on oneself.
During Krishnamurti's lifetime, he, as all others, had experiences of intense adversity. His brother, with whom he was very close, died, and the circumstances of his death, with the sort of clairvoyant predictions that he would be well, seemed to have affected him.
Yeah, went wrong.
He also had the closing of the Order of the Star, and even his own death. Can you, from your association and what you've seen, can you say something about how he related to adversity?
In his teaching, he has pointed out that every time we face sorrow, which means any kind of psychological suffering and negative emotion, it's an opportunity to learn about oneself. Because it's something that originates from a process within the consciousness, our consciousness. And so, we must not suppress it, but we must use it as an opportunity to learn about ourselves. And I think he did that when his brother died, because that was the one great attachment he had. And he was Shivarao and so on, who were with him on the boat, on the same boat when the telegram came saying his brother had died. He was like mad for 4 or 5 days, raving mad. But then, before the boat landed here, he had written a letter, which is in the archives, to a friend saying, I have experienced personal sorrow. I am through with it. I have cheated death. Those are the words he wrote. Now, to me, that implies that he is saying death came to trap me in self-pity and so on. But I have seen through it. And then you should read what he said about that he is now one with his brother and so on. And it seems that when he landed here, he was completely peaceful in 1925. And indeed, that was the year in which, during the Theosophical Convention, or soon after that, there was a meeting of the Order of the Star of the East, in which he changed from third person to first person and said, I have come, and so on. And there was an electrified atmosphere in which people like Mrs. Besant and Leadbeater and so on, everybody noticed this transformation from third person. Till then he was saying when the Maitreya arrives, when that consciousness comes, and so on. And now he said, I have come, like that. So that's taken to be the moment when the other consciousness actually occupied his body. But I don't understand that myself because I don't know what it means, but I have read this.
One of the features of Krishnamurti's approach to dialogue, or he spoke in front of audiences of thousands of people, and they were there for what they could learn or because they were in search of different things. But one of the characteristics of his approach to trying to communicate what he perceived, he was very uncompromising in terms of his presentation.
When it came to the quest for truth, because Mrs. Besant, I have read, told him that it's all right to have liberation, but it must be used to serve humanity. Churches. And he said, Amma, I can't do that. I think that doing that makes us treat human beings like children. And they need to stand up on their own legs and learn for themselves. That's my teaching. Go on and be dependent on others. So we could differ. When it came to the truth, we could differ from human beings. And that's quality. I think Mrs. Besant's respect was true. She followed the truth irrespective of what will happen in her social life. I mean, Charles Bradlaugh, Bernard Shaw, everybody laughed at her, thought she was foolish in all this, proclaiming this boy to be a world teacher. But she never changed her mind, never gave up, and so on. So he had that same quality, and he must have appreciated that he is seeing that as a truth that is valuable to her. And so obviously for her own son, she would have wanted that too. That if he sees something to be true, he has to follow that. It is not a question of agreeing or disagreeing.
So he spent a lifetime speaking to people about a way to truth, or about truth, perhaps not so much about a way to truth. But who do you think, from his perspective, what was the audience of people he was speaking to? Was he speaking to people in chairs, or was he speaking to something higher that he saw in them?
That I don't know what he saw in people, but he spoke to every human being. I think he saw that people are conditioned and they need to be free of their conditioning, irrespective of what that conditioning is. Whether it's the intellectual's conditioning or the conditioning of a devotee and a bhakta or a scientific conditioning, but they need to be free of that conditioning in order to come upon a more holistic perception of the truth. So he didn't really classify people as higher or low. In fact, in his teaching there is no levels. And that was one of the differences he had with Leadbeater's Theosophy, in which there was the first initiation and then the second initiation and so on, which probably came from the Buddhist writings. But he didn't put these steps. He said, so long as you don't have the truth, you are bound. And if you are bound, you need to learn. And there is no path to it, because it's not a mechanical path that you do this and you do that and you do that and then you will come upon the truth. It's a creative insight. And that requires freedom from the past. And therefore, no path can take you there. The paths are all given by knowledge, by the past. And so it is a pathless land. The truth is a pathless land. I take that to mean that the learning mind is the path. You are obviously on a path. Even the atheist is on a path, because the path means what? The mind is being put through various experiences. In meditation too. So, everybody is in a sense on a path. The question is he picking up the truth from his experiences, or is he picking up illusions? Because experience brings both. So ultimately, the important thing on the path is not the path, but the learning mind. The learning mind which picks up a truth rather than an illusion. So that's how I understand it to me, that it is pathless. Or in other words, you can get it on any path.
One of the things that I don't think very many people are aware of is that although he was a great teacher and was very serious in his teachings, he was also a man who loved humor.
Oh, yes.
I found your chapter in the book about that gave some of his jokes to be quite fascinating.
But he never mixed them up with his talks. I mean, in his talks, they come out to be very serious and humorless, and almost people feel that it's very negative because he is looking at all the negative side of life. There is division and there is violence and so on, and not the positive side and so on. That's true. But in his personal life, whenever we were around him, he would tell a lot of jokes and be merry and laugh like with everybody and so on. So it was when he came to the teachings, he was very serious, and there it felt one should not try to make fun or make jokes. Although he also said that you must be able to laugh at yourself.
I also noticed that in the jokes that were listed, the jokes, many of them I thought were quite funny, but it was never pointed at a person. It was generally something that was humor about the way we as human beings operate in such a blind fashion, which made it quite funny.
But he had a lot of jokes against communism and against the Catholic religion, things like that.
It's kind of tough on Catholicism.
Very strong belief was there.
Let me ask you this, because in many people's mind, there has been the thought that Krishnamurti left the Theosophical Society, that he went out when he stopped the Order of the Star, he went out on his own, and the Theosophical Society he left behind. You make a quite strong point that that is not in fact correct.
Yes, I mean, Crotona School of Theosophy invited me 2 or 3 years ago to spend 3 months studying this break between Krishnamurti and Theosophy. And so I went through all that literature which was available. And my conclusion was that he tried to change the Theosophical Society from within, because at that time it was sort of becoming like a religion, another religion, with its own sacred books, its own ceremonies, its own authorities and obedience and things like that. And it was not meant to be that. It was meant to be the wisdom religion, not like any other religion, where you are growing in wisdom. See, so that is an important thing to take from him, that we all know how we grow in knowledge, but how does a human being grow in wisdom? Because knowledge without wisdom becomes dangerous. It's used wrongly and destructively. Therefore, it's extremely important that when we impart knowledge, we also help the person to come upon wisdom. That's why he wanted to change education. He said education is just imparting knowledge and skills without an understanding of oneself or of life. And schools must put this inquiry of self-knowledge also into the mind of the child. It may or may not come to fruition, that's up to the individual. But it is our responsibility as teachers to introduce this inquiry, just as, or perhaps more necessary than the scientific inquiry, for which we take so much pains, and 20 years we educate the mind to do the scientific inquiry. So we are capable of doing this too, but we have not seen the value of it like that. So he wanted to change that. Create a learning mind rather than a knowing mind. That I will put it that way.
He was very clear in expressing that wisdom was not something that could be communicated through institutions. That in fact institutions tended to work against the coming to wisdom.
Unless you were raising questions. If you are giving answers, they have no value. You know, every university has a professor of philosophy, and he has all the answers of the Buddha and of Jesus Christ and of Socrates, and he will give you lectures on any of these and Vivekananda. But his consciousness is neither the Buddha consciousness nor the Christ consciousness, nor any other. So that's just a property held in the intellect or in the mind, from which he gives his talks. But his own life, he is ambitious, he is selfish, he is greedy, he is wanting promotions, he has desire for spacious living. It has to really transform his consciousness. So that the knowledge of philosophy does not transform consciousness unless you take those as questions and investigate them in your own life in order to come upon your own perception. There is a dialogue where he is explaining this point to students in Rockwood, which I have witnessed, where he is saying the words of the Buddha and of Jesus Christ are illusions for you, because you have not perceived the truth of that for yourself. And one of the students asked, "Sir, are your words also illusions for us?" And he says, "Yes, if you accept them." So he kept on saying in all his talks, "Please don't accept what I say, investigate." Basically, he was just creating a lot of questions about our life throughout human consciousness. And it's up to each one of us what we do with that question, how we investigate in our life that brings insights. Because he said, the answer is not separate from the question. It lies inside the question. The answer being the truth, right? Lies inside the question. Therefore, you need to explore the question in daily life, connected with daily life, in order to come upon those insights which transform consciousness. Because it's insights which end the illusions. The insight into what is true and what is false ends the false. But not the knowledge of the false doesn't end the false. Otherwise you could do it like propaganda. Just tell them this is true and that is false, and then everybody is transformed. It doesn't happen that way.
So probably, maybe you can say a little bit about the nature of insight.
It's a very mysterious thing. How does a human consciousness discover anything profound that was not known before? Since my subject is physics, let me take the example of Einstein. He discovered that space and time were not unconnected with each other, that they would mix up if you were moving with velocities comparable to the flow of light. Now, how did he come upon this? In his training, he was trained in classical physics, where it was always assumed that space and time are completely separate entities. Time is by the clock, and space is this distance from here to there, completely separate from each other. It was not in his experience, because in our experience we never encountered velocities comparable with light, so we don't see space and time mixing up. So it was not in his experience, it was not in his training. The only thing he had was some questions coming from experiments, showing that there is something amiss. We are not able to explain all the observations, that there is no ether wind, and so on. So he had this question in his mind, but that question couldn't be answered from the knowledge that he had. And yet, the human consciousness has this capacity to make a foray into the unknown, pick up a new truth and bring it into the field of the known. That's how all great creative discoveries have been done in art, in music, in science, in religion. And so that is a capacity which comes from the divine consciousness that we talked about yesterday. Namely, that the seed of the divine is that universal consciousness which is there within us if we let it flower. But if we are too attached to the known and the personality, then it blocks you, because that attachment refuses to see beyond the known. And though you will invent within the known, but you will never have a flash of insight which is beyond the known. So that's why this whole talk about going beyond the mind, beyond the known. And that's a mysterious process. It's a pathless process, so you cannot describe it how it is. You can describe what blocks it, but you can't describe what creates it. That's what it means that it's pathless.
Shortly before Krishnamurti
died, he called you and asked you to take on additional responsibility as a trustee for the foundation. Many of the people who were comprised the foundation trustees had been people who had been close with him for decades, and yet here he called you to be in that position, very near the end of his life, with a sense of great trust. What do you think was his, maybe not his motivation, but what was your experience of that?
Well, I think he had seen that the trustees have not really understood what he was trying to say or point out, not deeply understood that. And that the different foundations can start going in different directions and ultimately divisions might arise between the different foundations. And there were signs of some of it within the different foundations, like different organizations. So he called all of us to his deathbed, a few from each foundation. And he wanted, the last thing on his deathbed he wanted to tell is that it's all one and don't let division arise. That whether it's in England or in America or in India, this quest for truth is one. And therefore, all the foundations are working together, the schools too. And so it is our responsibility as trustees not to let any division crop up. Because he must have seen what happens within organizations and so on. So there is a lot of dialogue. He was asking me for suggestions, and I made some suggestions also to him, including the suggestion that would he come back to the Theosophical Society if they accepted his teachings and so on. And he said, is anybody offering that? Which means he was open to it. You see, he was open to it. Is anybody offering that? I said, no, not yet, but if they do, will you accept? And he said, when they do, we shall consider. That means not speculatively, he was not willing to answer the question. But when it actually comes up in life, he was willing to investigate it and decide what to do about it. So I went to Radha and I said, Radha, the ball is in your court. If you go and tell Krishnaji that we'll accept your teaching, come back, he may come back. And she said, personally, I think that's the best thing that could happen. But I'm afraid it cannot happen from the top. It must happen organically from the bottom. And it won't be right for me to impose this on the Theosophical Society. And then they will ask, why not other teachings by Besant and Leadbeater and so on? Why are you accepting only that? And so I can't really do this. So I left it there. But point I'm making was that Krishnaji in his mind was quite open. He had a tremendous affection for the Theosophical Society, but he was critical of the way it was going at that time in 1933-34. And the main philosophic difference, according to me, between his teaching and Theosophy is that Theosophists believed that all the different religions are different paths to truth. And he said, no, truth is a pathless land. That's the only philosophic difference. The rest are political differences which arose at that time, partly because some of the leaders of the Theosophical Society thought that he was betraying the society, he was against the society, and therefore he's ungrateful, we brought him up, and so on. So one understands that. I mean, it's a human reaction that was taking place. But that's not what he was doing. Because when Emily Latians wrote to him that you are speaking against the Theosophical Society, and he wrote back, the letter is there in the archives, saying, Amma, or mother, I think he called her mother, Mother, I am not speaking against the Theosophical Society. I am speaking against all the ideas of the world. That ideas don't take you to the truth, is what he was trying to say. But it was misunderstood at that time, and that's why I think Mr. Arundale, when he was the president, asked him to leave. And so he left in 1934. So it's not true that he left of his own accord, but that he was asked to leave.
Well, I have to say, unfortunately, time is getting away. I do want to thank you for what has been really a quite far-ranging and fascinating view into not just the working and teachings of Krishnamurti, but also into you as someone who is an exponent and someone I have found to be a very clear, someone who can present clearly and represent in the time that I've known you. And this is, I have to do this. You don't want it, I know. But in the time that I've known you, you have been so clear and so straight. Any question that comes up, you've been willing to receive and answer, nothing hidden, which is an unusual quality, I'm sure you know.
See, Tim, either you know something about it, then say it. You don't know, then say you don't know. So, what is there to hide when you are on the path to truth?
Well, I wish many people would adopt your attitude. But look, let me ask you one more thing, because when Krishnamurti was passing, you were with him. He called you to come and be with him. And at that time you came, and I think it was in Ojai at that time, he had gone back. And when you came in, of course, he greeted you very kindly, and he spoke to you about the jacket that you were wearing. And he asked you a number of questions about your jacket. He was always a very fashionable and sharp man when he was in the West.
Yeah.
And at that time, he gave you a jacket. He went to his closet and he told you to go to his closet, pick out the jacket, and take it. Do you still have the jacket?
Yes, of course I do. I cherish it as a treasure. But I have not worn it because at that time he asked me, can you alter it? I tried, and he said, can you alter it? I said, maybe the sleeves I can lengthen a little, but over here I would like to alter myself. And he had a hearty laugh. I mean, he was on his deathbed, but he could laugh on a joke. So he laughed, but I have not been able to do that. So I don't wear it, but I cherish it as a treasure, as a memory from him.
Once again, Professor Krishna, thank you. His book is Jewel on a Silver Platter. Any of you who have any interest in anything that has been said today, you'll find it not only readable, but really it's deep in terms of its portrayal of things. So I want to thank you once again, and thank you all for your kind attention.
Thank you, Tim.
hello, 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 cheek, cheek, hello, 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 cheek, cheek,